Hi, welcome back to The Real Deal with Kim Hollingshead. I'm your host, Kim. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7 WTN. If you missed today's episode, check us out on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio. You can find us on all of the social media platforms. And if you want to drop me a line, it's kim@therealdealradio.com, or you can give me a call. It's 615-257-0565. I would love to hear my listeners' thoughts and feelings about this particular case. It is so sad. We are talking about the Lindsay Clancy case. Lindsay is currently on trial in Massachusetts for the murders of her 3 small children. We may just look at that situation and go, wow, Kim, what does that have to do with real estate? But you know what? The Real Deal show is all about real estate, finance, and the law. And this is a trial that is happening in Massachusetts. And I also want to talk about sort of some of the other legal aspects that we can learn, not just medically, but also legally, these facts that we can learn from this situation that are going to help us in our own personal lives. It's not going to help us, but maybe we know somebody who might need to listen to this episode so that, we can help somebody else. Basically, here's a really real statistic. 74%, that is the share of antidepressants and anti-anxiety prescriptions in the United States that's written by primary care physicians instead of psychiatrists. Now, this is reported by the Healthcare Institute after examining employer-based health insurance policies. That is 3 out of 4 of these prescriptions are written by primary care physicians. And that is not this small little segment of the entire country. We're talking about more than 1 in 10 adults took a prescription medication for depression in 2023 alone. So the drugs that change this person's mood, their sleep, their judgment, and their impulse control are mostly getting started in these 15, 30-minute long visits by a doctor who takes care of someone's body, not their mind. Now, I want to be really vulnerable on today's program, and I'm going to open up and I'm going to share a little bit of my own personal story. And the reason why I want to do this is because I feel like if my story can help save just one person, then it's totally worth it. And so this is really hard for me because I've not talked about this publicly since it occurred. In October of 2024, I married the love of my life. I have not been so happy. We were both very, very happy and we were both very in love. We were ready to start our life together as a married couple. My husband was a widower. He was married for a very long time to his first wife who he loved and adored. And unfortunately, she passed away. And then we met, of course, we fell in love with each other and we married, so he had his own background trauma history and he was coming in. He had his career. I had my career. So we were kind of combining families and careers. And obviously, he had his own feelings and thoughts about the marriage coming into it, as did I. I mean, it's not easy at this age to combine everything. So it was a little bit of a time for sure. And I think that even though a couple is really happy and they're in love, there's always going to be that adjustment period whenever you first get married. I think that's totally normal. But I just adored him so much and I adored his family, every single person. He was very much the kind of person who was very easy to get along with. Everybody loved him. He had an amazing reputation. He was very friendly and very happy and just funny and charming and all the things. Okay. We just had such a blast together. I adored him. Basically, what happened is shortly after we got married, and I mean within 2 weeks, his doctor began prescribing him a number of different prescription pills. Things like antidepressants, sleeping pills, benzodiazepines. And these are all drugs that come with black box warnings. If you don't know what that is, it's basically that they come with a label on the box that says that these medications can be dangerous for certain people, that they can cause suicidal behavior, and that you're supposed to be looking out for the warning signs and let your doctor know if you have any issues. Basically, the doctor who prescribed this was his family doctor. He is one of those, concierge medicine doctors. And so Ben had a visit with him, and, no one told me that he had been prescribed anything. I was completely shocked to learn after the fact the list of medications that he was actually on. Now, I'm not going to go into any details here to talk about, exactly what happened, but I will just say this, that just a couple of months into our marriage, I began putting together a safety plan. I am so sorry to say, but I felt like I needed to leave. And shortly, of course, in the last tumultuous few weeks, I cannot even describe for anybody listening what that time period was like. But I left, and then shortly after I left, unfortunately, to say that he passed away, he died by suicide. So this is going to be possibly a triggering episode for people. Please take the warning, and if you need to turn it off or come back later, you can always find the episode on Spotify. So it was so beautiful to see, because my husband was a public figure and he was so loved by so many people. So he's really been honored, and he's been very, very missed by a lot of people, especially in his industry. And so I have personally seen a person completely torn apart by prescription drugs. I mean, anybody who knew my husband can tell you that this is absolutely true. There's no way that he understood what he was taking. There's no way. I mean, he was so simple in some ways that he wasn't a simpleton. He was a very, very brilliant man. I'm saying that he was just very simple, and he didn't take a lot of pills. He didn't take a lot of vitamins. He lived in a really simple way. So there's no way that he would have known what he was taking. That's one of the reasons why it's so dangerous for a family to just have a regular family doctor prescribe these drugs, because a 15-minute long consultation cannot possibly be enough time for the things, especially the 4 things that I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. But these are things that are absolutely vitally important that they get done every time these pills are prescribed. And if you're telling me that 74% of all antidepressants and benzodiazepines are being prescribed by family doctors, then there's no way that this is happening, okay? For the vast majority of people, we're talking about only a minority of people are actually being prescribed these medications as part of a psychiatric plan. That's opposite of what we need to be doing. 15 minutes is not enough time to tell the difference between depression and bipolar disorder. I mean, that's the most consequential call in all of psychiatry. And it's exactly the reason why the Clancy's lawsuit says that all of her doctors missed this point. I mean, somebody who can come in and they're just worn out and they're sad, well, they'll just leave the doctor's office with an antidepressant. But here's the thing. What if that person actually has bipolar disorder or postpartum or bipolar combined with postpartum? Then that antidepressant that you just gave that woman can actually drive her into an agitated state, or what's called mania. It's actually very dangerous for people to take antidepressants if they don't have depression. And it can take multiple visits with a doctor, a psychiatrist who is trained to practice in this area, to obtain an accurate diagnosis. And even then, just like what happened in the Lindsay Clancy case, mental conditions can be misdiagnosed. So a family doctor who treats the body may not even know that the patient is already seeing a psychiatrist, and that family doctor could then prescribe medication that is actually contraindicated for that person. Now, my husband did not have bipolar disorder like Lindsay Clancy, but he was absolutely prescribed medication that was dangerous for him. So we need to be changing the approach. I would strongly encourage any listeners that if you have a family doctor, if you're feeling symptoms, to talk with a professional psychiatrist and not just your family doctor. You need to ask for a referral. Number 2, 15-minute appointments cannot catch something called Akathisia. It's a drug-induced condition, and the Cleveland Clinic has described it as being, quote, unable to physically stay still. It's an uncontrollable need to move. So people who have akathisia will actually shake. They will tremble. They'll shake their legs, and basically they also describe having something that is akin to an overwhelming sense of terror. They feel this pain and this agitation all in their body. It's actually bad enough that it can drive people to suicide and also to impulsive violence. So you're going to take a look at what happened with Lindsay Clancy, a loving mother of 3 who cannot understand why she has been, had this feeling that she has to hurt her children. But that's what these drugs can do to a person. It looks exactly like anxiety. So when a patient comes in and they're put on something like a benzodiazepine, they need to be monitored very closely, because if it looks like the patient is actually getting worse and not better, or if their symptoms are not subsiding from being on the benzodiazepine, then they should be examined and they should possibly be treated for akathisia. This is what I believe happened with my husband. In my husband's case, when he complained that his symptoms were worsening, instead of actually, taking the steps necessary to treat any possible akathisia or, a misdiagnosis, no, what did the doctor do? He just switched up to a different kind. He put him on a different sort of a medication. And then he ended up over-medicating and over-prescribing to treat symptoms rather than the actual root cause of the problem. When we come back from the break, I'm going to go into topic number 3 and number 4 of why these drugs can be so dangerous and how you can protect your family from the overprescription of these medications. You're listening to The Real Deal on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I'm your host, Kim Hollingshead. Don't go anywhere.